Hello and welcome to Paperspace Tutorials. My name is James, and in this tutorial series, we're going to cover everything you need to know to get started with deploying a model to an endpoint using gradient deployments. Here in part 2 of this tutorial series, we're going to show how to upload an ONNX model to Gradient and then serve it to an endpoint as a deployment. By the end of this section, we'll be able to query that endpoint to run inference from a Gradient notebook. The first thing we're going to need to do is download the relevant files onto our local machine. To do that, go to github.com/gradient-ai/ONNX-deployment and copy that URL to clone onto your local machine. Once you've done so, you can go into your local file manager and then go into the Models, Fashion MNIST folders to get the two files that we're going to actually be using today. Once everything is set up on your local, it's time to upload the model onto Gradient. To do so, go back into your Deployments Tutorial project space and tab over to the Models section. In here, click Upload a Model, and then you can simply drag and drop your files into the window. Be sure to change the model type to ONNX, and you can go ahead and name this Fashion MNIST. We're going to be using the Gradient Managed Storage today for this exercise, and we're doing that because we're telling Gradient to use the native file system and storage rather than organizing our own. Once you've done all that, you can go ahead and click Upload to upload your model files. Once the files have been uploaded, pay attention to this ID right here because we're going to need to use it again in just a little bit. Now, it's time to actually make a deployment to use this model. Go back into your Deployments tab, and once you're there, click Create. Then we're going to again go in this top section where it says Run Deployment and click the link Upload a Deployment Spec. Let's name our deployment Fashion MNIST deployment. And here we get to the section of import. This default YAML script will deploy the same Streamlit application that we used in the tutorial part 1. In order to serve our model, we're going to need something different. For the image, we're going to use cweatherhill/paperspace-ONNX-sample. We're going to make sure that the port we have exposed is port 8501. We're using a single machine, which is a C4. And then finally, we have this model section. This is where the ID that we saved earlier becomes relevant. Make sure that you paste in your model ID here and that your path is opt models and then the path to the model name. Once that's done, you can go ahead and hit Create Deployment. All right. Now you'll know that your deployment is ready to be used as soon as you get this ready symbol in the status bar. Once that shows up, go ahead and copy your URL to your endpoint, and then we can perform a health check to make sure that our deployment is working correctly by pasting it in with /health check at the end. If everything is working properly, you will get model server is running outputted in the top left of your window. We can also check this using curl. Simply do curl and then input the same exact URL into your terminal, and if you get the model server is running, you know that everything is working correctly. Now that we confirm that everything was uploaded correctly with the health check, let's take a look at the model itself using its metadata, which we've provided at v1/models/fashion-mnist/metadata. Here we can see some useful information like the type of input that we have, any type of output that we get from using the model, and so on and so forth. You can also compare these to the outputs listed in the deployments tutorial at docs.paperspace.com to confirm that everything was uploaded and working correctly. Now that we have determined that our deployment was set up correctly, let's actually go query it using a Gradient notebook. Go back into the Gradient console and go to the Notebooks tab and click Create. Once you're in the Create Notebook page, make sure that you select the TensorFlow runtime and the smallest available CPU machine, since we don't need a whole lot of processing power to run this query. And then in your advanced options, make sure that you have the prediction client.ipynb from the ONNX deployment repo as your workspace URL. Once that's done, hit Start Notebook. Once your notebook is running, go ahead and go into prediction-client.ipynb and run this first cell to make sure that matplotlib is installed. Next, scroll down to the second cell and look at where it says predictions, and it has this f string here for sys.argv1. We're going to want to take our endpoint URL from earlier and replace that entire value here with it. Once that's done, this code will send a post request to your model at that URL to generate a prediction about whether or not an image fits into a specific class, in this case, whether or not an ankle boot is an ankle boot. So let's run this and see what happens. As you can see, we have correctly predicted that this is an ankle boot photo. And that's really it. You've now successfully uploaded an ONNX model to the model registry on Gradient, created a new deployment to serve that model, did a health check of the endpoint using both your browser and curl, and finally, we queried the new API endpoint using code from a Gradient notebook to generate a prediction on a sample image from the MNIST dataset. In this case, an ankle boot. Using this guide as a template, you should now be able to upload and deploy your own models as API endpoints within Gradient deployments. Thanks for listening and enjoy using Gradient.